Okay, Catherine Fife, thank you so much for joining me today
It's a pleasure to see you today. Yeah, actually on Zoom. So
on
that's great.
Zoom. Yeah. I love Zoom too. It's not just for pandemics anymore, but let's talk about some of your work. One of the things I was really interested in talking to you about was um, this Bill 21, and I want to start discussion by framing it like this. And I know you know the answer because it's been your pet project. But how many times now have you tried to introduce Bill 21 or legislation like it now?
Three times, beginning in back in 2019. And ironically, all those times the government did actually support it at second reading, Adam. And then they just sent it off to committee to languish and to die. So they, even in like the debates in the legislature, the optics of it, they understand that, people care deeply about seniors being able to spend their last years together and on care campuses. So they didn't want to vote against it at second
Right.
reading, but then they just sent it usually to social policy for each and every time. And then once the government prorogued government like early, and that when the government does that, of course, all legislation on the order paper dies.
Right. That's an important note. You have to start again from scratch. And I think there was a whole host of legislation,
Oh,
not just your private member's bill, when the government called an early election back in January.
yeah, I like to call it an early self-serving, very expensive election, which was very painful for a lot of us. And actually, perhaps more importantly, there was a lot of barriers for people participating in that election. And there's a
Yeah.
reason why we don't usually have winter elections in Canada, is that, it's fun to sometimes talk about politicians falling downstairs, which has happened several times to me. There was some serious barriers, and people, the main question at the door was why did Doug Ford call an election 16 months early? And it did interrupt some good important work that was happening, not only on my bill but also on the IPV, intimate partner violence,
Right.
and that committee that was working on that. And there's this little thing called climate change. There was some issues that were being debated at the time as well. And listen, we knew that Donald Trump was going to cause a lot of chaos, which of course has proven to be very true. And we wanted to put in some measures and some strategic investment to create a more resilient economy. But Doug Ford had other plans.
Yes, he did. Unfortunately, one of them isn't passing the Till Death Do Us Part Act. Um, can you talk a bit about why you sort of need to enshrine in legislation the need to have seniors be able to stay together, and at the same time, why it is so important? I mean, aside from the obvious, if you've been with somebody for 40, 50, 60 years, you want to stay together.
Yeah.
Like the health benefits of that for older couples.
Yeah. Okay. So I will talk about the health benefits, but
Yep.
I think from a strategic perspective, if you create legislation and you enshrine in that legislation the rights of seniors to stay together, then Adam, you actually have to design a system so that that can happen,
Right.
right? And we're not designing that system right now in Ontario. There are some care campuses, and so a care campus would be because we know that people don't age at the same rate, right? So some couples like Jim and Joan, for instance, who finally did get reunited after 7 years. Jim's still independent, so he has a little apartment on a care campus, and then he can go down a hallway to a different unit where his wife Joan is receiving very specialized care because she is not as independent. And then there's assisted living in between that. So instead of him driving, 30 minutes every day, he can just walk down the hallway. And that's the kind of system we should be creating in Ontario.
Mm.
And we learned important lessons during COVID.
Mm.
The other thing that we did learn in COVID is that loneliness kills.
Right.
And it was a hard lesson. We had over 5,000 seniors died in long-term care during that pandemic. And really, some of them died of a broken heart and of loneliness, and others died very tragically by neglect. So, with the research and the evidence says that if couples stay together, their mental health, their physical health actually benefits. And why wouldn't we want people to be healthy? I mean, there's cost savings, sure. But there's also, that that little thing called that moral and ethical, bar that we should be aspiring to design a system that respects seniors who built this province and who paid their taxes, and they deserve the best in their last years. They do not deserve to be cruelly separated at the end of their life.
Right. And I want to kind of bring all these aspects together,
Sure.
because there is as you said, you would have to maybe not create a new system out of whole cloth, but you'd have to recognize that there are investments that would have to be made in order to enact the intent of your private members bill. But also, and I didn't search my carefully archived Ontario government press releases for the past few years, but I think it's been a while since we've seen like any meaningful direction on long-term care. That seems to be one of the things we've memory hold post-pandemic is
Yeah,
that,
that's
it's just not a priority, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, listen, right now everything is about Trump and tariffs, right? And
Yeah.
so and then also you have these distractions that, the Premier Ford is very good at distracting people away from core issues.
Yeah.
Take his asylum comments just even yesterday and then his walk back on it. So yeah, I mean, what we do need a system that actually meets the needs. I mean, right now the government talks a lot about beds, and actually they
Mm,
regard beds in long-term care homes as a home, and they've actually included that in their numbers because we know the housing file is also quite complicated. But they are, I mean, right now they've awarded a license to one of the homes that actually is where the most deaths happened. And so this is a government that really does regard long-term care as a business and
mm.
as a private endeavor. And the difference for me, as the critic for economic development, I value private sector, but I'm telling you that long-term care truly is an extension of the healthcare system. Once you reach a certain age, we shouldn't just be abandoning all healthy best practices for seniors. We should be enhancing those systems and then also making sure that they have access to available care. And so right now we've seen really the commercialization of long-term care. And we did learn some good lessons. Not all, private operators are bad actors, but when you look at the weight of the evidence and the research, the not-for-profit sector and municipally run long-term care centers where their staff are valued and well paid and that in turn impacts the level of care and the turnover of those employees, right? So there's there's good reasons to redesign and have a holistic conversation about the kind of long-term care system we want to build. And we shouldn't be doing it piecemeal. We should be doing it because we enshrine in legislation the rights of seniors to live in long-term care. And that also includes air conditioning. Like I think they're going
Yeah.
to be 38 degrees today, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine being a 98-year-old in a bed in a home with no air conditioning? It's it's 2025. Like we have to do better by our seniors. And this should be holistically part of broader legislation. But if you will not design that system, Adam, if you don't enshrine in the law the rights of seniors to have access to quality living conditions with their husband or with their wife or with their partner, because it's an inclusive piece of legislation.
Being a former 40 something that used to sleep in a bed without air conditioning, I could attest I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But the I think one of the things you're getting at is we can reach the standards, and we see that, in some operators can reach those standards. I know that the Elliott here in Guelph, which is municipally run, um, is providing the 4 hours of care per patient per day that we're supposed to be reaching for. The Elliott is not a huge operation, But I mean, maybe that speaks to more localized service with long-term care that if you're a smaller outfit, you can reach those goals a bit easier as opposed to if you're a big conglomerate like Chartwell.
Yeah, like I mean, the corporate model of caring for seniors is not what seniors want. I mean, I can tell you, especially after COVID, they do not want to go into long-term care at all. And you
Mm,
look at like Finland and Norway, they have a model where we have smaller homes that are in community. They're not out in the burbs or, isolated from the rest of the community. And they're not institutions. They truly are small homes that with regular staff. And so there's relationships there as well, right? So yeah, I mean, and then we could talk about the whole, lack of regulation on retirement homes, which are actually housing a number of seniors who should be in a higher level of care, long-term care. And the cost of those retirement homes are exorbitant. And we've been actually lobbying to have some health and safety regulations in those homes as well. But they also have a very strong lobby, I would
mm,
say.
yeah.
That makes a difference with this particular premier.
Maybe to finish up on this file, three times you've tried to get this on the agenda. Three times it's gone to committee. Are they essentially sending this to committee to die and like maybe, there's somebody in the premier's office somewhere like, well, Catherine, just give up on this. You know,
Yeah.
it just seems
Uh,
like they're punting it so it'll never get done.
Yeah, well, so I'll just tell you, like the legislation was inspired by Jim McLeod, right?
Hmm.
And he came in just after the election, and he said, "Listen, Catherine," he said, there's still two families, two couples in his home. They've been still separated. He said, now he is, after 7 years, reunited with his wife,
I was
Joan.
gonna
So,
say, yeah.
this sparked this new conversation. And he said, would you give the bill to a government member to take and run with it? And I said, of course. Like the whole goal it's not about me, and it's not about actually the bill. It's about the law changing. And
Mm,
whoever wants to do that, if they can get the government to move on it, and that could be a government member, then the law needs to change. And that's way more important than whose name is on the actual legislation. So that's where we are right now. And I do have good working relationships with some PC MPPs. I don't fight with them all. And so there's good people there. And so I'm lobbying now my colleagues to move the legislation forward. And but perhaps there be a day that it will actually pass.
well, hopefully. But since you brought it up, who are you fighting with?
No, no. Well, I mean, listen, I mean, it's an interesting question because, there is this imperative right now at Queen's Park where
Mm,
people want us to work together, and it actually takes less energy to work together than to fight.
right.
Um, but I will say that, I work closely with the Minister of Economic Development, and I want the ideas that we bring forward to at least be listened to.
Right.
And so I will be honest with you, I'm doing less fighting these days and more trying to work in collaboration because we are moving into a very serious recession.
Mm,
People don't want us to talk about it, but we are already seeing a cooling in small businesses and small and medium-sized enterprises. Municipalities have already indicated that there's going to be some major setbacks for them, which will have implications for us as citizens and as taxpayers.
right.
And so people want us to work together. And so truly in this era, I'm doing less criticizing and more, reaching across the aisle. And I think that, to date it hasn't proven to be overly successful, but I'm still hopeful. Yeah.
All right. Um, Speaking of listening, your leader, Marit Stiles, is currently on a tour of Ontario doing some listening. She was in Waterloo on Monday. And I'm not sure how it's organized, but it seems like this is organized around, this stop is going to be about X topic, and the topic in Waterloo at the University of Waterloo was post-secondary education. So why is that a priority for you and for your riding to talk about post-secondary education?
Well, for Waterloo, I mean, and also I would say Guelph. I mean, when your community is anchored by a university and sometimes by college, like I have Wilfrid Laurier, University of Waterloo, Conestoga College here, students play a major part in the advocacy that I do at Queen's Park, right?
Hmm.
So this roundtable actually had, administration and students and union representation because we wanted to hear like what the impact of the, cuts, because it is a cut when it's not, geared to inflation and not keeping up with the needs of the community. And it's longstanding. Like this is not just the Conservatives, this is a hangover also from former governments. And then we wanted to hear directly from students about the impact of those cuts. So we could convey this to the government, which has been quite resistant on this file. For me, because I chair the Leaders Council on the advisory, in an advisory capacity around tariff response and proposing solutions to the government to be, more propositional in this endeavor. The PSC sector, colleges and universities are part of us being competitive.
Mm.
And when they're weak and when they are being undermined, that will compromise our economy. Now, don't get me wrong, like I know that universities are not just about getting jobs, but in this climate, in an aggressive tariff war with the United States, we need to be supporting our best and our brightest, and we need to be pivoting to those gaps that will obviously start to show themselves are in the job market. So
Right.
what I like, and and there is an opportunity here, and I do want to be positive in this regard, is that when you're talking to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, for instance, and they're saying, listen, we want to start processing our own vegetables and not sending them to the States, then Conestoga College has a food processing manufacturing sector there. So they can be trained in real time and they can move out. So we need that workforce piece, but we also need the government investment on the front so that we can actually be competitive and more resilient as a province. And we're not going to do that if colleges are, like Algonquin College cut 51 programs.
Right.
Conestoga's food packaging and food inspection and food processing is in dire straits because the cuts to for like international students.
Right.
So we need to be really mindful of what kind of province we want to build. And we're not going to do it if colleges and universities are being undermined.
Well, there's also an opportunity, right, with a lot of the things happening in the United States. Really smart, talented international students who could be innovators, maybe don't want to go to places like Stanford and Harvard and Columbia and could be perhaps persuaded to go to U of T or University of Guelph or Wilfrid Laurier.
Yeah, and that actually came up at the round table yesterday, Adam. And but that kind of talent that is looking for a new home, they want to know that those institutions are well supported and they
Right.
want the research funding to be there. And so after we did our roundtable, Marit and I, and Peggy Sattler, who's our critic, we also went to Communitech and to Velocity. And so these are incubators where knowledge transfer from university happens back out into the private sector and we create good jobs.
Hmm.
And so it's a win-win if that pipeline is there and if that ecosystem is being supported. So Velocity, to be fair, is federal, provincial, and municipal, and we saw some amazing innovative businesses that are, coming to the fore and that would actually benefit the healthcare system as well. So this is our call to action, right? And that's why our leader, Marit Stiles, is going around the province. I think last week she was in steel mills, she was in sawmills. There's only three in Ontario. And I just want to share with you, like at one point, one of the operators in one of the mills, so this is the forestry sector, right? And most of our wood goes down to the United States. I think
Mm.
Home Depot has a major, major contract. And she said, well, what are you looking for? And I think one of the operators said, we don't want a handout, we want a contract.
Right.
So here we are, our housing starts are at 1955 levels. The government needs to get back in the business of building, and let's keep our forestry sector alive by collaborating and and creating some good, productive contracts with Canadian sawmills and keep those jobs right here in Ontario. And that's the missing part of this tariff conversation right now, which is a little alarming and will ultimately lead to some conflict if we don't start moving on it, right?
Should be a bipartisan effort to make the case that Canadian wood should go directly to the Home Depot in Canada instead of down to the US and back to Home Depot in
Yeah,
Canada.
the Home Depot, but also, I mean, our Homes Ontario plan would build deeply affordable, attainable housing. Like we have 1,400 housing encampments. People are
Mm,
living in tents. I mean, this is not something that we should be proud of.
no.
So, and non-market housing is and traditionally has been the purview of a government that understands that you won't stabilize the economy or the healthcare system or the justice system without housing. So
Yes.
once again, there are options here that the government can take. There's action that the government can take. And this would be this would be money and investments well above that $100 billion tunnel under the 401, right? So it really is about priorities
Right.
and and using the best evidence and research to actually move forward.
Well, I think that's the question is priorities. And I wish we had time to get into the housing stuff, but unfortunately we're running out of time. But the on the education issue, we've had tuition freezes for several years, and I don't think anyone wants to see tuition fees go up. On the other hand, I think you look at the government benches, there are probably some people there who, you know, have ideological, I mean, no matter how silly that is, ideological issues with universities and don't want to be seen, increasing that funding. It just seems like this is another area, and correct me if I'm wrong, where it seems like the government is kind of petrified to take action one way or the other, and it
Yeah.
just gets worse.
Well, their own Blue Ribbon report, right, had some recommendations, and tuition raises was part of that. However, they also had recommendations around providing, loans and grants and like having some support for students, and that came up at the housing at the PSE roundtable yesterday as well. So yeah, there's fear that they're going to, leave it to the institutions, probably like download it and make that
Mm,
decision. And then those institutions are going to have to make the really hard decision as to where to set those rates. But again, the evidence and research is there is that if you provide some financial assistance and you reduce the barriers to universities and colleges, in the end, the return on investment is there because you have a workforce that is employable and you have a stronger economy.
right.
And that's what we need right now under the Trump threat and the tariff debate.
But in the meantime, I know the universities of Guelph is looking at uh, some red ink. I know that Waterloo University is looking at red ink. We could talk on and on about the stuff going on at Conestoga. Um, don't don't these institutions need a cash infusion now, or is this going to be like we're seeing something happening with the school boards where the government's kind of taking them over and saying, "Oh, you guys can't manage your own fiscal house, so we'll have to." I mean,
Yeah.
is it possible that's something we'll be looking at our universities soon?
Well, I mean, if you look at Bill 33, which is really looking, it's an overreach of control, or even around how student fees are collected, those ancillary fees, and how they're spent. Which yesterday, the presidents of University of Waterloo and Wilfrid Laurier, those students said they felt this was very undemocratic because these
Mm,
are democratic, institutions. And that's really, I think that their fear is that the government is really just trying to control political engagement on,
mm,
campuses. And what came through loud and clear yesterday is that those fees are really going to feed students. So that's
yes.
how like this, or sometimes keeping them housed by like just bridging that, $75 or that $50 to make their rent versus being homeless. So the students are rallying and they see what's happening, and perhaps that's what Doug Ford is afraid of. But post-secondary institutions traditionally have been, where the best and brightest ideas come out and where people find their values and their principles. That's the arts part, right?
Right.
And but also the employability is also really important.
For sure. It's a balance, tricky balance, which I know is the job description for an MPP, but we'll have to leave it there today. Catherine Fife, thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me on the show.